all that content of showing off for the brand is going to, one, reduce churn, and then two, increase the amount of subscribers that hang on.
When we build out content calendars, some of the highest performing ones are like the ingredient highlights or like emails like that are not a hard sell. It's not this product. It's like something that's more brand building. And again, like you're just building that relationship with the customer. You're subtly reminding them of the product that they have and why it's good for them or why they should try it or why it's delicious, that type of thing.
I know the email team of the agency does this all the time. When there is a big sale, like that's an easy win.
Welcome back to another episode of Chew On Retention and Subscription. I am joined today again by Gina and Pearson from Stay AI. And today we're going to talk about something a little different from the last few episodes. For us, there's two ways of kind of acquiring a customer, right? Is you play into the model of try and get somebody to buy as much as possible upfront and get this massive AOV. And then there's another part to the business where you can acquire subscribers only. And I think this is something that's very interesting for brands, especially that are in the consumable space and trying to build out a subscription business and model. And so I think let's dive into this. Pearson, you're the man behind the acquisition plan. First off, give us a little bit of a background on your experience, just acquiring customers, subscription only. I myself am probably going to take notes here, so let's get into it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, well, I think to go back, I started buying on Meta in 2010. So I've been doing paid media for about 14 years now. And I believe the Meta ads, it's Facebook, but the ads platform came out in like 06, 07. So pretty quick, like as soon as it was usable, really, as a self-serve platform, we started buying on it. So yeah, I'm excited to get into the topic. We spent at the agency about 600 million in Meta ads over the last 6 years. So not all towards subscription, of course, but we've certainly driven about $1.5 billion in D2C revenue, with a lot of that being subscription. So wow. Excited to get into everything that we're doing on the ad side.
Amazing. So I think let's kick it off, right? For brands that are just trying to get into acquiring customers, right? Walk us through the steps that it takes to actually get things off the ground and running. Yeah.
So I think really, but when you're starting to get a subscription program up, and obviously, as we've talked about in the past, like really works for products that are going to be recurring and are going to have some sort of kind of change in someone's routine that's going to require or make it more convenient for them to have a recurring order. And so I think it really starts with what type of offer or funnel are we running with the subscription. So there's a handful that kind of varies depending on what someone's selling, but trial offer, right? So super low price offer that then rolls into subscription, some sort of starter kit or bundle that's going to have some like perceived additional value, like a gift with purchase kind of bundled in with the core product. And there's a few other variants, but that's probably the starting point, is looking at what the right type of program is based off of the product, the AOV of the product, and how people are using it in their lives.
Yeah. There's a couple things there that I want to unpack, right? So for the initial offer being, say, like a free trial, kind of going into a full-on subscription, right? What are your thoughts on, this type of offer being a little bit, maybe too good, right? Or maybe attracting everybody. How do you think about the implications that has on, maybe LTV or even people even getting into the second subscription? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that those offers, you're finding that balance, right? Like certainly that offer is going to have a higher churn than like a full price offer, but then of course it's going to have a much lower acquisition cost. So I think you have to look at that and decide what that trade-off is that makes sense for the business. From my perspective, when you're first, like let's just assume for argument's sake, you're just trying to acquire your first couple hundred customers, right? I'm less concerned about whether that offer is going to ultimately lead towards a high churn on that first cohort. And I'm probably more concerned about like the messaging around the product, making sure I have like product market fit. So let's just assume that maybe this isn't just like a new subscription program, but it's a new product, newish brand to market, right? So I'm less concerned about that at first and more concerned just about, can I even get someone to try the product? Like, are my ads resonating? Is my creative up funnel working? Is it driving someone into a landing page and then pushing them into making that purchase? And then, I start to think a lot about how those cohorts are performing.
So we're talking about different types of offers that we can obviously get, people in on the brand and the product. Given that you almost have to wait a period of time just to see how people react to the product, the offer, etc. How do you go about assessing if you have even the right funnel to begin with?
Yeah. The way that I break the funnel down and look at it like post-click. So first of all, there's obviously a traffic source that's driving someone in, right? But post-click and like pre-purchase, the way that I break it down and think about it is there's kind of three core components. There's this initial landing page or landing experience, and there's a lot of different ways to approach that, right? Like you could do a listicle, you can do a video storefront, like video commerce focused. You can do a social proof page that's just jammed with a ton of, press, reviews, testimonials, that sort of content. And I mean, there's countless other landing pages. And I think about that first post-click experience of like, what are we showing them that's going to educate them about the product, educate them about the brand, give them social proof that's going to push them further down the funnel. And then on top of that, I'll layer on, whatever that promotional layer is. So, you can obviously take a listicle and then push someone or have it embedded in the buy box on that page into a bundle, a sample, like a trial, starter kit, whatever it may be. So it's usually, step one is get them to stick around, get the bounce rate down, make sure they're getting like the product education, brand education that they need and that they're excited. Then testing the different offers in terms of what is the right entry point into subscription. And then the third piece that I'll layer, and this is more just like kind of standard CRO work, is like, okay, great, we've got them landing somewhere, they're getting the product education, product efficacy that we want. We've decided that it's a quiz into a preset bundle that we've configured off of what they responded to. How can we now improve it even further? Oh, we can add an upsell in the cart, or what can we do to make the AOV a bit better, or make the conversion rate a bit better? And that to me is like the final piece, which is that commerce optimization layer on top.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Kind of 3 steps there, setting up and finding the right funnels, and you can test within all 3 of those buckets.
Makes sense. No, I love the fact that you brought up that there's these 3 points that you almost have to optimize on an ongoing basis, right? I want to dive a little bit deeper into those, because for brands out there who are maybe just starting, right? If we're talking about customer 0 and trying to go from 0 to 1,000 customers, CAC is the most expensive thing in terms of a line item on a P&L, right? How do you think about where CAC should be in relation to the fact that forcing subscription on the first order may not have the best conversion rate, right? How do you even lead off, right? Let's maybe start with creative. What types of creative have you seen, resonate well with people, kind of attract the right audience and set the stage for a subscription only product / brand?
Yeah, well, I think when you think about subscription-oriented products, it's typically going to fall into a few different categories that are part of, like we were saying, like someone's routine. And so if we're talking about the first 1,000 subs, I'm not really super concerned about messaging subscription in any of that ad creative. Mm-hmm. I think that comes a little bit later, where you've actually figured out what the right offer is, and maybe some of that has value, right? But up, in the first 100, like up funnel in the ad creative, I'm more focused on like problem solution framework and getting someone really excited about the actual product. So any sort of problem solution, statics, us versus them comparisons, video testimonials, whether that's UGC, whether that's like a more professional influencer, or maybe the brand's got a celebrity face to it, whatever, iPhone shot content, and then statics delivering that like product efficacy. And that's really what I'm focused on, regardless of whether it's a subscription or a one-off purchase. As you said, like the higher AOV is, no matter what you put in after that click, we have to get someone really pumped about the product first and believe in spending the money on that product, regardless of whether they're being pushed into one of those different funnels. So that's definitely going to be the focus to start.
Yeah, I think copy is also very important here, because you also have to set expectations, right? Yeah. I think one of the bigger mistakes that we made was being a little like too aggressive on some of our claims, like, oh, you'll see results immediately, or and it's like, okay, well, do I even need a subscription, right? I think setting the expectations, and I think even brands like Hims do a really good job at doing this, where it's like, you're not going to see results until 90 days out. You need a subscription, right? So I'm curious your thoughts on maybe even like setting the expectations. How important is that when it comes to kind of building out the funnel and you know, kind of pushing people like, hey, you kind of need this.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of getting someone clicking off an ad, I mean, your job as a media buyer, and this is where there's a lot of times disconnect between different teams, whether it's siloed internally at a company or there's just different agencies or partners running it, is the job's to get the click really and stop the scroll and to make sure that like you're getting the click from the right audience, right? And so I think a lot of that framing that you're talking about, you know, expectations needs to sit on that initial like landing page and experience. But I think where people miss on subscription, and Gina, I'm sure you can chime in on this as well, is just because someone signed up for subscription, especially if you're running a starter kit or a trial where there's like definitively perceived value that has nothing to do with the core product and the subscription itself, you still have to treat that person, those customers, that cohort after they come in off that first purchase as if they're just one-off purchasers, and continue the product education so that once they do get the product, it's not just the landing page that's messaging that, because they'll forget, right? It's like that whatever email, SMS flow that's coming after that purchase that, yeah, it's different for a subscriber than a one-off purchaser, but you're still trying to, you know, push product efficacy pretty hard and ensure that they, you know, are going to stick around and wait for those results if that's the case, or that like, not that any of these products are necessarily like placebo effect, but like at least that they're like so pumped about all the comms they've gotten that they like, you know, perceive it to be doing exactly what it should be day one because of the communication being really tight.
Yeah. Gina, I got a question for you, right? Just within even Stay, right? With the amount of information that we have, right? Given churn risk levels, reasons why people are unsubscribing, all of that data, right? I feel like can be leveraged in some way. How do you guys think about, you know, how brands should be leveraging that information to kind of fuel the acquisition side of things?
I think especially for brands that have different types of offers to get into subscriptions. So you've got trial kits, you have just like your basic product subscription. Looking at churn by product is very important. And knowing if there's a certain product that you're offering where people do just churn off of it immediately, like what is the actual cost to acquire those customers versus if there's other products that are stickier. I remember when we were first looking at some of your stats, we found that some products that you didn't push a ton actually had really high retention rates. And it was like gummies and things like that, because I think those products were just so easy for people to take, where it's a little bit harder to remember to like mix in, you know, collagen or something like that, where I think it's something that people don't look at. They just look at churn rate, and churn by product is so important.
Right. And then there's also, I think, a ton of data that we get, which is like the qualitative data, right? How do you guys, you know, think about utilizing that for maybe even optimizing the funnel?
Qualitative like survey data sort of thing. Yeah. Well, I think what you can also be looking at, so, and when Gina's saying product, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you also mean like the offer, because that's typically going to be like a different product technically in Shopify in many cases, but like the actual like offer and whether it was a sample kit or not, and not just the SKU that's involved with the sample kit. So definitely. I think like when we're talking about some of the qualitative data, there's that product aspect to it, and then, you know, we see like demographics and psychographics. A lot of times those will line up with certain churn profiles and therefore be higher or lower quality customers. So, you know, you might find, I'm just making this up as like a really simple and obvious example, but you might find like, okay, if a bunch of college kids subscribe, they don't have a lot of money, they just subscribed for that starter kit to get the free thing, right? Yeah. And it's like, it's similar to like when you do, I think like when people run sweepstakes, right? And it's like, okay, you got this whole cohort of people that just wanted the free thing. They don't care about the brand at all. So that's something that I think we're looking at, is like matching up demographics and psychographics, if that's captured via any sort of like third-party tool that's maybe enriching the data, or if you're using like a post-purchase survey or customer survey, or anyone that's running a quiz pre-purchase, right? There's a lot of data in there as well. So especially with functional products, you might find that, you know, a product like skincare, people have, let's say, 6 different conditions that a product or a set of products is treating, and maybe one of those is just super high churn, right? So that's I'd say how we use that. And then what we would do is, and in most of those post-purchase surveys, you know, people are asking like, what creative did you see? What message resonated? So then you're going to change your creative strategy, top of funnel, and your audience targeting to adjust for some of those insights. Yeah.
I think what we're also alluding to is the fact that this model, and this is my opinion, so I'm curious your thoughts here, is that this model isn't for every business, right? If you're just starting out and you don't necessarily have maybe funding or a funnel in place, it's like you're spending, most of the times your CAC is going to be higher than that AOV. So you're probably losing a ton of money on the first order. Again, obviously the hope is that they come back and purchase, month after month. But how do you determine if the business is even ready for this type of model? And who do you think this model is truly for?
I mean, first of all, you need a product that people are going to use, repeatedly, and then have it be part of their routine. So $1,000 necklace probably shouldn't be on subscription, right?
Right.
So let's just assume that the product categories fundamentally make sense. But
right.
I think that you want to have product market fit, and you want to have, like I was saying, if you're trying to acquire your first few hundred subscribers, you're really just focused on driving CAC down, and that's the same as any business starting on e-commerce. Period. What makes sense is, I guess there's two ways to approach subscription, right? You have passive management of it, where you're going to turn on a subscription program. You might get 10 to 20% opt-ins on the PDPs, people that just flow into subscription. I think that's great. There's really not, for most of those CPG verticals, there's no reason not to have that on. But if you're talking about running meaningful paid dollars against subscription, I think what you would want and what you're looking for is to have the product market fit and to have at least some sort of element of loyalty that you're excited about on your one-off purchasers that's going to translate into a strong subscription program, so that you can then not worry so much about that initial AOV, have the lower AOV, and have some confidence in a pretty tight payback period, and that you can manage to a 90 or 120 day cohort profitability, cash conversion cycle, whatever you want to call it. But those cohorts need to flip into profitability.
Right.
So you need the margin too, the gross margin, right? So yeah. No,
it makes sense. I think even for brands that are thinking or listening, oh shit, I have a 90-day payback period or 120-day payback period. I think even within Stay, there's a lot of tools that you can kind of leverage to maybe speed up that payback period. One being maybe the upsells and the cross sells. How do you think brands should be utilizing that within their subscription model?
Yeah, I mean, I think even just before you get somebody as a subscriber, some of the things with upsells, we're seeing a lot of success with the brands that do build-a-box programs. So people love that just gamification element, and every time, so you check out with this initial kind of mix of products, and then you pick the products that you like the most, especially with flavors of something, and then they're able to go in and customize that every single time, and it also kind of preserves your AOV, which is great, because when you sell somebody maybe 4 different flavors of something, if they didn't like to, they might just go into the subscription and then remove 2 line items.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it went from, a $100 order to a $50 order. So putting some type of parameters, doing bundled boxes, I think that's always a good way to start. And then other things would be using Experience Engine to do some type of cross sells, figuring out that somebody who's subscribed to product A might really like product B, price testing what those upsells could be, loading stuff in a carousel in the portal, putting a smart banner, using Klaviyo Quick Actions for add-ons. There's so many different ways, but we definitely shouldn't just forget about the subscribers. You should always be pushing some type of cross-sell.
Even within your funnels, right, when we're trying to just attract subscribers, right, low AOV, do you have any, I guess, methodology on upsells even during that funnel, even just one-time purchases?
It depends on what it is, right? What that initial offer is and how the upsell would pair with it. I mean, before getting into upsells, I guess a couple things there would be, I'd prefer to use low cost, high perceived value gift with purchase in bundles, right? So that really helps, I think, when a perfect example would be years ago when we were starting to build Super Coffee's e-commerce and subscription program. We were bundling in backpacks, t-shirts, soft goods, right? 75 to 90% gross margin products with a case of coffee. Right. And that pulls the whole thing up really nicely, right? So you have, I think, a lot that you can play with in terms of, and it's a pain in the ass to source gifts with purchase and deal with that, right? But you have a lot that you can do there to play with margin, and not necessarily even AOV, but in that case, being able to sell a couple cases full price. And then there's this t-shirt that really didn't cost much, but is perceived to be worth $25, right? Yeah. So I think that's super nice. In terms of where upsells, I think, come into play pre-purchase on subscription, there's those elements that Gino was just describing. And then, there's a lot of slick funnels you can run if you are doing the just pay shipping sort of offers, which that's only going to work if you have like a lighter weight product, of course, like not the case of coffee, for example, but
like samples and
sample size stuff. And then I think there's a lot of gamification you can do there to get from like the whatever it was, just pay shipping for $9.99 or whatever, and tack a bunch of stuff on, which I think can be done really effectively. In terms of, I guess, the second part of that question and getting like those one-off purchasers into, bigger cart size. I mean, I haven't seen anything like particularly novel that you guys haven't talked about previously, like, upsells in cart and whatnot. But I do think that the fixed bundles, like at a super high AOV with high perceived value, they work. I mean, during COVID, especially when we were running a bunch of like beverage products that you wouldn't expect to work on e-commerce, and I won't reveal their data, name names, but certainly some brands that you would recognize. We had people at like $100, $150 AOVs by just getting like a really slick landing page, nowhere else they can go, right? Like your classic funnel where there's nowhere to click. And it's like the big welcome bundle kit with all the cool stuff and the limited edition offers, that is one thing that always works, right? Like the limited time flavors or offers. And that, for that brand in particular, that tripled their AOV just by driving all the traffic into that fixed bundle. Wow. And for there being a lot of perceived value with what was in it, right?
Yeah.
So
there was one thing that we tested recently, which was an entirely new funnel altogether. So our current funnel, to kind of set the scene, is we sell our collagen burn, a 1 month supply, a 3 month supply, and a 6 month supply, right? No subscription. My goal is to literally just be first order profitable. If I pull ahead revenue, I'm okay with it. And we were trying to maybe move away from that, because for me, I need a high AOV to afford a CAC decent enough where I'm making a few dollars on the first purchase, but I'm not killing my LTV, right? So we launched 2 new products that kind of fit the category, and we created a bundle, a high value bundle. So now it's 3 individual products at a $100 price point, but it's a 30-day supply, right? So we actually started running it, and my AOV on my previous funnel was around $70, right? So you would have like maybe 40% of the people buying a 3 month supply, 40% buying a 1 month supply, and the rest buying a 6 month supply. With this, I'm able to sell a 30-day supply at $100. So I increased AOV by $30. So I can actually spend a little bit more to acquire a customer. Now, my only thing that I'm thinking about is I could probably make that bundle a little bit more high value, drop the price just a little bit more, and get people into a subscription. So I have a high AOV bundle that's on subscription. I can probably get CAC low enough where I'm break even, maybe a couple dollars profitable. The point being is that I don't necessarily think brands out there need to think in a low AOV sense of like, okay, well, I'm going to sell my starter pack at $20 and see if you can get a CAC low enough. You can sell the $100 bundles and actually maybe get a decent enough CAC to make that work.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, certainly I think when we're talking about like starter kits and trial kits, like those typically are higher AOV because there's maybe is a gift in there, but there's usually like whatever, the shaker and the blender or mixer and all these different things. And it is like, if the standard AOV for that store is $30, it is $50, $60, even with the gift with purchase factored in. And I think to your point too, on the different, the 30, 60, 90 day supplies, what we found too is like, just get rid of the 30-day, or like in your case, you're going to, do multiple SKUs. So that's a bit different, but like, I think you can narrow in on that. And a lot of times we'll see, it's so funny to me. Like there's so much CRO work that people want to do. And it's like, hey, can we just like remove the single pack, right? Like why is that even on the site? Like, our AOV is low. It's like, great, let's eliminate everything that's not, a multi-pack SKU. And it's like, well, the conversion rate can go down. I can tell you it usually doesn't, because people just are going to buy the product and get into the lowest pack size that they see, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff like that. But when you're thinking about that funnel too, we see a lot of folks, because we have a CRO division at the agency, right? So we see a lot of folks that'll come to us and say, oh, we want to A/B test saying the price per serving and this and that, and all these little nuances on the buy boxes and on the product pages. And like, sure, maybe sometimes there's like a small incremental lift, but the reality is it's the big swings like you just described, completely changing the offer and reconfiguring like what that structure is, that's going to make the difference. It's not going to be like oh, well, we added the cost per serving and now the conversion rate is going to double,
Right.
or the AOV is going to go up, or whatever it is from these little changes. It's those bigger swings, I think, that make it feasible to scale.
Yeah. So we talked about the game plan of, creating your funnel, creating an offer that's valuable enough to get a decent CAC to, get customers on a subscription. So now let's say we went from 0 customers to 1,000, right? Does the strategy look different going from 1,000 customers to 10,000 customers?
Yeah, it definitely is. Because I think if we're talking initially about getting that CAC down, right, and we've talked a little bit about like what happens post-purchase, but I think when you're at least from my perspective, trying to get, and there's certainly, if you're bootstrapped or like really cash constrained, then there's
Right.
like, some of the stuff needs to get pulled forward. But typically those first few hundred customers, it is about going back to like the 3 kind of layers of the funnel, the way that at least I look at it. It's about like nailing that initial landing experience, because you still want them excited about the product, and then what the pack size is. It doesn't really matter at that stage yet, right? So I think when you're going into that next stage of growth and going from say 1,000 to 10,000 subscribers, it really comes down to now the actual contribution margin on those cohorts. And so we're always then starting to look at, okay, well, what's the, based off offer, based on the promotional offer, what is the projected lifetime contribution margin of that cohort, and does that actually make sense? Because now we're starting to spend more money, and we don't really have, like, you acquire 100 customers and they all churn. Like, yeah, it's some money, but it's not like the end of the world in the grand scheme of like a venture-backed business, or even just a, standard good business, right? So I think at this point now, at that scale up and spend, now you've theoretically found some offers. So that now I'm starting to sprinkle that into my ads. Now I'm really trying to prime people, not just on product efficacy, which we've theoretically figured out that product market fit, but I'm also trying to push them to be primed for subscription right out the gate. And I'm playing a lot now with the promo and basically like commerce optimizations to get that AOV up, to make the payback period pretty tight, and also monitoring pretty closely how each of those cohorts, based off channel, based off offer and product, how they're performing from a projected contribution margin standpoint. And what I mean by contribution margin, for those that maybe aren't optimizing off of that, everything we do from a media buying perspective now is effectively based off of that as like the North Star, right? And we're talking about taking, the revenue minus obviously cost of goods, and then cost to acquire the customer. So that's where I think in that stretch of going from 1,000 to 10,000, that's when you're really starting to play with those offers and like grind out every dollar in terms of, is it better for me to do that trial and I lose money on the first purchase, but my acquisition cost is sub $20, versus a high AOV bundle, but my acquisition cost is $60. Like, how are those cohorts performing post-purchase, and where am I going to get the best bang for my buck? And you guys know this obviously, but at that point, you're not spending a few $1,000s a month on Meta. You're spending, potentially closing in on 6 figures or over 6 figures a month in spend. So your creative testing has to vastly expand, and your messaging has to change a lot, right? Because you've crossed the, you've made it, whatever, the adoption curve, crossed the chasm, whatever, but you've made it to a point now where, sure, the core customers that just loved the product, and the messaging really resonated with those early adopters. You've made it now to a group of people who maybe they don't fully understand, whatever, mushroom coffee or collagen, whatever the product is, right? There might be actually more education, or you might need to dumb it down. Like if you look at like Olipop's marketing, how it transformed over the years,
Right.
It went from like a prebiotic, right, and like a lot of gut health messaging to like a better for you soda after a few years, right? So I think when you think about that jump, those are a lot of those creative decisions that you have to make and account for now. And the last thing I'll say there, which I think is really important, people miss, so we audit obviously dozens of ad accounts a month. They miss the diversity of the talent in the ads. So you have to remember that, like, whether it's age, whether it's race, ethnicity, whatever it is, Meta is going to optimize for that, right? And so we see a lot of folks that'll start a brand, start an advertising program, and every single person in a UGC asset is like looks exactly the same, right? We need to appeal to a much broader mix now, so we need to be really mindful of that.
Right. No, it makes sense. One thing that you mentioned is getting the best bang for your buck, and then also scaling on Meta, right? Is there a point where you're okay with spending more to acquire a customer, because you have the data of like, all right, cool, 6 months out, I know that, my LTV is this, I can maybe afford a higher CAC because of it, right? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think to an extent you can start to loosen up, but I still am pretty nervous because, like you said earlier, at the end of the day, it takes time to see how those cohorts perform. So I still really want a pretty quick payback on that cohort. Like, I don't want to extend things out past, well, obviously there's certain products that maybe only get shipped quarterly or something, but I don't want to extend out past 2 or 3 shipments or 90 to 120 days typically, in terms of like whatever that CAC is, even if it's creeping up in terms of that, being paid back in full and us being profitable on that cohort. But I do think fundamentally that any media buyer at this point, you should be making decisions based off of not just, like, again, this is more for subscription, not
right.
Bundles, sure, first purchase profitability, but should be making your decisions based off your projected lifetime contribution margin of that customer. And lifetime could just be at 1 year life, right? Like, kind of reeling it in a little bit.
Right.
But I think that's how we're typically spending now, is saying, hey, we can spend an extra $5 because we might have a slightly lower, like $5 on CAC, we might have a slightly lower contribution margin as a percentage, but the number of customers we're able to acquire at that slightly higher CAC is going to drop way more to the bottom line.
Yeah. Gina, I know you're getting antsy because I feel like even though this is retention and subscription, the acquisition side of things is always the sexier part.
I know. Listen, I've lived years in the shadow. Yeah. Like, I'm well aware that retention. Right. We're having our moment.
Yeah,
we're more popular.
But see, this is where I think the retention side of things is also very important here, because if we are growing a subscriber base from 0 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to beyond, right? Keeping people in their subscription is hard work.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, the different retention strategies when it comes to, talking to a subscriber versus talking to somebody who's just buying for, one time and that's it.
Yeah. So I think it's important, I think Pearson had mentioned before, right when somebody checks out, to have different flows for if somebody is a subscriber versus if they're not. You should be thanking them for their purchase very differently. And then based on your product and how much you need them to consume the product, again, the number one reason people cancel is because I have too much.
Right.
So being able to make sure that they're using it, I'm sure people buy collagen, they get it, they don't get it from the door for 7 days. Yep. Then they finally have it in the kitchen. They use it twice a week instead of every single day. And then the next order ships out and they're like, I've used this product 4 times.
Yeah.
Doing something on email or like through text messages where you're kind of helping them like build that into their routine. You're reminding them. I think there's definitely a fine line. There's a lot of room to A/B test messaging, how much messaging is too much where people are getting annoyed and then canceling versus like these gentle nudges to be like, oh, like, have you tried the product? Here's the product benefits. Something that I've been doing with a lot of brands that I really like the best analogy that I've been able to use, which might not be perfect for this audience, but is like when women are pregnant, they check on an app and they're like, oh, like the baby's the size of this today. And it's like a fruit. And it's like just a mental thing of like, oh, this is how I'm tracking progress that I can't really see. I think that is the type of messaging that sometimes you need to do with these supplement brands and these products, that because you can't see it every day, you can't feel it. But if you send the notes of like, hey, today your gut health just, or you just removed 20% inflammation from whatever, or you just did, like those types of things kind of help people keep in check and keep on with the products.
Yeah. I think even when it comes down to the specific messaging, right? Like you said, you're splitting things up. So for a subscriber, you're not going to send them emails about promotions every other day.
You don't want to tell them that you're having a site-wide sale where the product is now less than what they have if they're on subscription. Exactly. You want to tell them things about either upsells that they can add to their next subscription, like things that complement their product or reasons to keep up with the new healthy habit that they're building or something like that, where they're really, getting into the habit of getting it in their routine.
Yeah. I think one thing that we've also found does really well is taking the chance to, or taking the time to show off about the brand, right? So for example, we have our Facebook community, right? There's tons of people in there, tons of success stories. So being able to like highlight those and kind of give people the, oh, well, I can attain this, or just show them the light at the end of the tunnel type of content. Like that to me is low-hanging fruit, very easy to get and kind of deploy out, and you're not devaluing the brand because it's different than like, oh, we have a site-wide sale, we're doing this, we're doing that, right? So I think all that content of showing off for the brand is going to, one, reduce churn, and then two, increase the amount of subscribers that hang on after a certain time. And then obviously the one-time purchases, it's like, all right, well, we'll send anything and everything to get them to come back for the second time, you know?
When we build out content calendars, like just for emails that go out to subscribers, non-subscribers, some of the highest performing ones are like the ingredient highlights, or like emails like that are not a hard sell. It's not this product. It's like something that's more brand building. And again, like you're just building that relationship with the customer. You're subtly reminding them of the product that they have and why it's good for them, and or why they should try it, or why it's delicious, that type of thing.
Right.
And I think you can also, like from a commerce perspective, like I know the email team of the agency does this all the time, but you know, when there is a big sale, like that's an easy win where like, I know we had a bunch of subscription brands where the first week of November last year, we emailed all the subscribers and just say, hey, you're going to see some sales. Guess what? We already applied our Black Friday, Cyber Monday offer to your November shipment. Don't worry about it. And then they were opted out of all the rest of the comms for that Black Friday, Cyber Monday stretch, right? And that's like, I think you have to look out for those like opportunities for like those little wins where like, yeah, you're giving up a bit of margin, but you're really building a much stronger connection with those subscribers, right? And they really feel taken care of. Versus on the flip side, they all see the Black Friday sale and they're like, why am I subscribed, right?
Cancel this. Yeah. Cancel this immediately.
We had a couple brands that, because there was different levels of how, like some, yes, do I love preaching that you should just give everyone the discount, but there were some that were like, we absolutely cannot do that. And I liked that they did in the portals. Like when you logged in, there was a banner that was like, Black Friday special just for subscribers, get a better price that's on site, because you'd have to go into the portal to cancel. So you would go into the portal, you would see this banner, and I was like, all right, that's a tricky way. Instead of just
nice.
auto applying it to everyone, I liked that as well.
So we talked about the retention strategy when it comes to communicating with subscribers, right? And we said that we have to split it up. One-time purchases get different messaging and communication, right? Sticking to the subscription being the goal, how are you thinking about converting those one-time, buyers into actual subscriptions?
Yeah. So your post-purchase, like I said, should absolutely have a fork in it. You talk to subscribers differently. One-time purchasers, you should be kind of guesstimating based on your product when's like their average reorder, maybe hitting them up at like the 20-something day mark with some type of offer about subscription. Like, why is this subscription? Like, hey, hope you like absolutely love the product on your next order. Did you know you can save X% by, starting a subscription? We can keep you accountable. Like, there should be other benefits outside of just price if you've got them for why starting a subscription for this product makes more sense. And feel free to put that in 2 to 3 emails in a follow-up. One is usually not going to do enough of the trick for the full audience.
Right. Does the acquisition team help at all with the retention efforts? Because I feel like they've dialed in their funnels with the free gifts and the high value bundles. Can you use that strategy to turn one-time customers into subscribers?
Yeah, I think we don't see a lot of people that'll run ads against it, which whether that's right or wrong, I mean, you can debate based on a brand, but I think landing pages is like where there's still like a lot of the principles that we talked about, where there's still opportunity for continued product education and then offer testing for those one-off purchasers that you're then trying to get into subscription. So I think to me, in an ideal world, at the very least, whoever's running those like that funnel optimization and acquisition efforts, like it's frankly rare that retention teams get access to a web team to build landing pages, but when you can, I mean,
there's a massive opportunity.
We do not have that type of pull yet.
And we've been playing with, on the agency side, a lot of like video landing pages and content that sits between an email and text and that subscription offer to do that. But fundamentally, that's probably the best opportunity there, at least to start, right?
Yeah.
Low hanging fruit.
I agree. I think we've kind of said this before, where it's like somebody might have bought, but they're not fully sold yet, right? And so you have to treat those one-time customers almost as if they haven't even bought yet, right? So even driving them down another landing page to get them to get on a subscription, because it's you still need that education of, especially if it's supplements where it's continued use, right, is going to get you to the benefits that you want to see, right? Whether it is like beverage, like a Poppy or an Olipop, like those are benefits that if you stop taking the product, you're not going to see it, right? So continuous use, right? Brands like maybe even Hims, where it's like you're not even going to see benefits until day 90 anyways. So continue down the route. So I think there's a lot of education that still needs to go into it. But the value and the offer, I think, is still very crucial in that moment to get from one-time purchase to being a subscriber.
Yeah, and there's something we've said too about being creative, right? Like at the end of the day, like we've spent a lot of time today talking about like the science behind products, product advocacy, like the tactical stuff, the promos, but like people want to be part of a community, right? They want to be part of something. So I think when you look at the very best subscription brands, whether it's sending like the sample flavor out and they get to vote on it or things like that, where they really feel bought in, everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people miss that, right? Yeah. And there's a fun factor that you also need in there for most products.
So selfishly, you mentioned in the beginning that you guys have spent $600 million on Facebook over 6 years, which honestly I don't even know how. Any tips, tricks for the media buyers out there? Would love to hear your takes on it.
Well, yeah, I'll preface by saying, I mean, at the end of the day, any advice you get on Meta is only as good as the context about the specific brand, product, spend levels, et cetera. So like, I'll make some blanket statements on what I think's working at our agency today, which, to be super thorough, it's mid-May when we're recording this episode, because that's how fast it changes. I mean, we see that right across accounts. Like you ask me what bidding tactics or account structures are working today, it'll be different in a few months, no 100%. Doubt. For us, I think we've seen a lot of struggles with ASC or Vantage Plus campaigns, right? As many have. So combining those in terms of account structure with interest-based, some tight but broad targeting, and like frankly like ABO setups has worked really nicely to flow right traffic in or new eyeballs onto those ads rather, because we've just seen frequency creep up. So I'm always surprised. Again, we're auditing probably 24 accounts a month on top of the 50 or 60 we manage, and I'm always surprised at how high frequencies are, especially when you're doing like lower AOV CPG, and like you can't have someone see an ad 5 or 6 times in 2 weeks. Like it's just too expensive. So that's a good way to control that, I think. From my perspective, what we're seeing in accounts now is that automated bidding has been horrible, and we've just been torching budgets. So if you'd asked me a few months ago, we wouldn't have been doing a lot of manual bidding, but now we are. A lot of cost cap, a lot of, I guess it was ROAS targeted versus like there's no manual, it's just automated, but a lot of that now in all of our accounts. Well, I guess I say all of accounts, but people spending like over 50K a month. Yeah. So the smaller accounts is still not as big of an issue. From a creative perspective, we've talked about this in the past, in the last like couple months, but statics for us have been outperforming video a lot, like in almost every account, which is of course unusual because you still hear everyone preach, just hammering UGC. I think TikTok narrative ad content that's platform native with TikTok's editing being moved over into Instagram, like for ads, that's been really, really strong if you are talking about video content. So taking like TikTok organic posts, a lot of times they don't even have anything to really do with the product. It's not really an ad. It's like, they're like 5 tips about this thing, and then there's a product, push in there somewhere. I think we've been surprised at how many people keep resetting social proof on ads by swapping those URLs. So when we were talking before about that offer testing, like making sure that you have a good URL structure and data framework on post click so that you can swap those offers out really effectively and you're not changing URLs out and screwing up the ads. Yeah, that's definitely, I don't know, that's a few things that are probably worth getting into. But yeah, I think the post click experience is still without a doubt, every audit we see where performance isn't where people want it to be, it comes down to where the traffic's going after that ad and what the offer is. So to me, like how we've shifted our team, and I think this is important because people still have this siloed, is the same person who's responsible for that Meta account needs to be making decisions on creative strategy, post-click landing page strategy, and the entire offer for that funnel start to finish. Otherwise, it's disconnected and everything gets jacked up. So,
yeah. I mean, even how you enter the auction, right? People forget that it's your bid, it's the estimated action rate, and then your actual conversion rate. So it's literally what you're doing on Meta, the creative, and what's happening outside of Meta is how well you're going to succeed on Meta.
Yeah. And I think speaking of creative too, everyone loves talking about creative testing. And I think the way that we break it up, and I've just seen so many people fall into the iterative testing trap where it's like, well, we changed this small little thing. And like, that's fine. Like if you have a really good winning asset, you should be doing, what I would call iterative testing and trying to swap out the hooks, the call to actions, keeping that creative fresh, trying different variants of that winning piece. But there's not a lot, from what I've seen at least, of people looking for also what I'd call like breakthrough creative testing, right? Where it's like, where it is actually just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and saying, these are some weird ideas, they might not work, but we need to at least try to find some additional breakthrough assets that we could then go into iterative cycles on. Yeah. And that's rare that we see people doing both of those creative testing functions at the same time and doing it well. Yeah.
I recommend a 20-80 approach. Spend 20% of your time iterating, 80% of your time new angles, new concepts.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, well, you guys are also far more sophisticated, I'd say, than a lot of media buyers, but that's what it should be, right? Yeah. And then you go on these accounts and people are like, we've been doing creative testing for 6 months and there's been no improvement. It's like, well, what creative testing did you do? And it's like, well, we took the same video and we made 30 different versions of it. And it's like, okay, well,
that will do it.
We might need to make some bigger changes.
So we talked a lot about, acquiring customers on subscription, how to retain them. From both of you, I would love a chew each, one thing to take away from this episode and implement in your business today. What would that be?
Mine would be make sure your post-purchase flow has two different sides for one-time purchasers and for subscribers.
Love that.
So I think for me, like the big thing that people miss on is they get paralysis from analysis, and they start to look at cohort performance at orders 3 and 4 and lifetime value and contribution margin, like, oh, we can't possibly discount by 30% because then our margin's all screwed up. And I think you have to throw all of that out the window and just acquire customers first. And if it is 30% and that is going to screw up your margin, but all of a sudden you can acquire a ton of customers at a good CAC, then you need to figure out how to fix your gross margin or figure out what you can bundle in and solve that problem later. But I think people just get too nervous about the long-term impact an offer is going to have on their business before they even know whether it works or not.
Chew on that. If you want more from us, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, and check out the website chewonthis.io.